You really think buying a house will make them love you? Her voice slid through the clinking of glasses like a knife dressed in charm. I felt the air tighten. Forks paused. Someone coughed softly to fill the silence she'd created. I smiled, though my throat ached. It wasn't about that, I said quietly. It was about finally having something that's mine. Across the table, my sister leaned back in her chair, her lips curling in amusement. Sure, Ayla, keep telling yourself that. That's when it hit me. The familiar rhythm of our family gatherings. One jab, followed by silence. Then that wave of polite avoidance. No one ever stepped in. They just pretended not to notice. I'd spent most of my life mistaking that silence for peace. But it was indifference, pure and simple. I lifted my glass. Steady hand, steady breath. I'm proud of it, I said. It took me 10 years to get there. No one replied. Mom stirred her coffee as if that tiny motion could erase the discomfort in the air. Dad scrolled through his phone. My brother adjusted his watch. It was brunch at the Maple Room, the kind of place with polished wood and polite smiles. I'd invited them to share my happiness, to tell them I'd bought my first home, a small, light-filled space just outside Portland. I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd see I wasn't the family disappointment anymore. But instead, I was back in my usual role, the one they loved quietly, pitied loudly, and praised only when I was out of the room. I took a slow breath. Anyway, I said, forcing lightness into my tone, the view's incredible. You can see the whole river from the kitchen. My sister laughed, that sharp little laugh that always found its way under my skin. Wow, a view. That must make up for the fact that it's in Portland. I let it pass. I'd learned not to fight every comment. Still, it burned. Inside, a voice whispered, "You don't need their approval." But another part of me, the child who once brought home perfect report cards and still got silence, knew that wasn't entirely true. I'd worked for a decade to get here. Long nights drafting blueprints, freelancing to pay rent, skipping dinners to save a few more dollars. Every corner of that house was built on exhaustion and persistence. And now, watching my family sip their mimosas like I just told them about a parking ticket, I felt something inside me close. If you've ever worked your whole life for something, only to have it dismissed in one breath, you'll understand. I didn't say it aloud, but I thought it, hard enough to feel it echo in my chest. I looked at my sister. You should visit sometime, I offered. It wasn't a peace offering. It was a test. She smiled, her eyes glinting. I'll be busy, but maybe I'll send you something for the house. A plant or advice. The table chuckled softly. Even Dad smiled. That was when I realized she wasn't just mocking me. She was performing. The family adored her confidence, her ease, the way she spoke without ever fearing judgment. I sat back, quiet, and let her bask. I'd learned that speaking less made people uncomfortable. It made them wonder what I was thinking. But inside, I wasn't wondering. I was remembering. Every unpaid bill I'd handled alone. Every time I'd called Mom for support and been told, "You're strong, Ayla, you'll figure it out." Every subtle reminder that I wasn't the favorite child, just the one who didn't cause trouble. Now I saw it clearly. Their love came with conditions. Success only counted if they could take some credit for it. The waiter brought more coffee. My mother thanked him, then said to me, without looking up, "So, what neighborhood is it in again?" "Selwood," I said. "Oh." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's nice." That was the closest I'd get to approval. My sister smirked. "Isn't that the area where houses are, what's the word, quaint?" I could have snapped, but I didn't. I just smiled. Quaint sounds right. She wanted a reaction. I could see it in the tilt of her chin, the way her words lingered like bait. But I wasn't giving her one. I folded my napkin slowly, deliberately. "You should see it before you judge it," I said. "It's small, but it feels like peace." Her smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "Well, peace is priceless, right?" I nodded. "It is." There it was, the quietest victory. Not in her tone, but in mine. The conversation drifted on, vacations, office gossip, some distant cousin's engagement. My name didn't come up again. That was fine. I'd stopped expecting it to. When the check came, I offered to cover my part. My father waved me off. "I've got it," he said, his voice warm but absent. "Congratulations on the house, sweetheart." The word sweetheart landed flat. It wasn't affection. It was dismissal dressed as kindness. I nodded. "Thanks, Dad." As we stood to leave, my sister hugged me, the kind of hug that's more for the cameras than the heart. "Congrats again," she said, patting my back twice. "I'm sure it's cute." Outside, the sun hit my face. I breathed deeply, pretending the cold air filled the space their words had emptied. By the time I got to my car, I wasn't angry. I was something sharper, aware. That's when my phone buzzed. A notification from social media lit the screen. My sister had just posted a new album, Our First Home. Dozens of smiling photos, balloons, friends, champagne flutes. Her caption read, "Finally found our forever place. Couldn't wait to share." My hands trembled, not with jealousy, but recognition. That post wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. And right there in the parking lot, I realized this wasn't about a house. It never had been. It was about her making sure no one ever saw me. First, my phone lit up with that familiar buzz, the kind that feels heavier than it should. I opened the family group chat, expecting maybe a leftover comment from brunch or some half-hearted apology. Instead, the screen was full of heart emojis and exclamation marks. "So proud of you, Lena. Finally settling down. You deserve it, sweetheart." The pictures were all there. Balloons, champagne, the caption, "Our first home." I scrolled through the flood of messages. My name nowhere to be found. Not one mention of the home I'd saved a decade for. Just Lena's perfect lighting and her perfect grin, holding keys that gleamed like a trophy. I typed a message, then erased it. Typed again. "Looks beautiful." I finally sent. Simple. Safe. The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. Someone sent another heart emoji, to her. I sat there staring at the screen, the blue light painting my face in the quiet of my living room, my new living room, the one I'd chosen, paid for, built in silence, the one no one seemed to care existed. I scrolled back up, watching the thread stretch years back. Birthdays, holidays, dinners, Lena's promotion, Lena's engagement, Lena's new car, each one a celebration. Mine were polite replies, a few words, a single thumbs up. I used to think they just forgot, but now I saw it for what it was. Forgetting requires effort. This was something else. This was a choice. I texted again. "Thanks, everyone. I just moved in too, by the way." Sent it. Watched the check marks turn blue. Silence. Then came a sticker, a cartoon of champagne popping, from my brother, not directed at me. I leaned back, the phone heavy in my hand. My reflection stared back from the dark screen, tired eyes, faint smile. I remembered when Mom used to tell me, "Don't take things so personally, Ayla. Lena's just more expressive." That was her word, expressive. As if my silence made me less human. Lena had always been the golden one, the kind who could turn an apology into applause. I used to think she had some secret, a charm I lacked. But as I got older, I realized it wasn't magic. It was permission. She could say or do anything and still be loved for it. I had to earn mine, one careful sentence at a time. I scrolled down again. The chat pinged with another photo, Lena holding a Home Sweet Home mug. Mom commented, "You've made us all so proud." My stomach turned. Proud. That word never belonged to me. Not when I graduated, not when I started my own firm. Not even when I sent them the first render of the eco house I designed solo. "Nice, Ayla," Mom had said. "Maybe one day you'll do something with more heart." I remember that day so clearly. I'd smiled then too, the same quiet smile I wore now. I opened my camera roll and looked at the photo I'd taken yesterday. Me standing in front of my little blue house, the sold sign half tilted in the grass. No filters, no makeup, just a tired woman with her own keys. I thought about posting it, maybe writing something like 10 years of saving finally paid off, but I didn't. I knew what would happen. A few likes, a few distant relatives clicking heart emojis out of politeness. Then silence. I stared at Lena's caption again. Our forever place. I knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't just want a home. She wanted to own the narrative, to be the first, the admired one, the one who outshone me even in milestones I reached before her. My phone buzzed again, another comment, another heart. I turned the screen off, but the words still glowed in my head. Finally settling down. I whispered it to myself, testing the bitterness in it. I'd settled too, just not in the way they meant. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's the echo of a room where no one ever asked if you were okay. That realization hit harder than any insult ever could. I'd spent years waiting for them to notice me, to see I wasn't the failure they'd quietly labeled me as. But invisibility doesn't happen overnight. It's built piece by piece. Every ignored text, every shifted glance, every joke that dies before reaching your name. I picked up my phone again and reread my own message. Thanks, everyone. I just moved in too, by the way. It sat there like a ghost among fireworks. I should have known better. I was never part of the spotlight. I was the one holding the camera. For a moment, I thought about leaving the group chat. But that would be dramatic, and drama was Lena's thing, not mine. I stayed. That's what I'd always done. Stayed quiet, stayed polite, stayed out of the way. I scrolled up to Mom's earlier message, the one from last week. Let's do brunch Sunday, girls, it's been too long. I wondered if she'd ever send something like that just to me. Probably not. In her mind, love was efficiency. Feed everyone at once, feel nothing too deeply. The phone buzzed again, a new message, this time a private one, from Mom. My chest tightened as I opened it. Don't make it about you again, Ayla. I froze. The words didn't even sting. They just landed, heavy and familiar. I'd heard versions of them all my life. Don't make it about you. Don't start something. Don't ruin the mood. The funny thing is, I hadn't said anything wrong. I just reminded them I existed. And somehow, even that was too much. I locked my phone and set it down on the table. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock. My new home, echoing with the sound of being unseen. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in that stillness, I realized I wasn't angry. I was done waiting. Wow, Lena, this place is stunning. The woman in the floral dress said it like a line rehearsed for applause. I smiled and added a soft nod, pretending I hadn't already heard that exact phrase 15 times. The house was nice. Open layout, new paint smell, wine glasses lined up on the counter like they were part of the decor. Lena floated through the crowd with her perfect hostess smile, the kind that belonged in real estate brochures. I stood near the doorway, clutching my gift bag. Hey, Ayla! Someone called. I turned to see Claire, one of Lena's old college friends. She hugged me too tightly, her perfume sharp enough to sting. So when are you moving out of that tiny rental of yours? I felt the air thicken. Oh, I said with a small smile. I actually... But she was already looking past me. You must love the freedom Lena has now. No more noisy neighbors. Lena's laugh carried across the room, soft and polished. She didn't correct her. She never did. I sipped the cheap champagne someone had handed me and let the bubbles burn their way down. Around me, everyone seemed to fit. The kind of people who wore confidence like perfume. Expensive. Effortless. I tried to relax my shoulders, tried to look like I wasn't keeping count of how many times my sister said we when she meant I. When she introduced her fiancé to a group of guests, she said, "We're thinking of knocking down that wall to open the kitchen up more." He nodded proudly, as if he'd designed the place himself. I watched their synchronized smiles, wondering if she'd rehearsed that too. A woman with bright red lipstick leaned toward me. "You must be so proud of your little sister," she said warmly. I smiled back, polite. "I am." She glanced around, lowering her voice. "And where are you living these days? Still that rental near the river?" I felt the words stick. "Actually, I bought a place," I said quietly. Her brows lifted. "Really? How wonderful." She looked over at Lena. "Did you know that, hun? Your sister's a homeowner too." Lena laughed, a small, careful sound. "Oh, right," she said. She mentioned something about that. Then she turned back to the group. "But it's not about the house, you know. It's about having someone to share it with." Everyone nodded. I felt the air leave the room for me. I set my glass down. "Excuse me," I said softly, and slipped into the hallway. The walls were pale gray, the kind of neutral that feels like absence. Family photos lined the staircase. Lena and her fiancé in matching sweaters. Lena with our parents at the lake. Lena at her graduation. I looked for myself in the frames. I wasn't there. My reflection caught in one of the glass covers. For a second, I barely recognized my own face. Tired, polite, invisible. I thought of the text from Mom earlier that week. "Don't make it about you again, Ayla." I hadn't. I was just here, showing up like a sister should. From the living room, laughter burst again. Someone clinked a glass and called for a toast. I stood at the bottom of the stairs listening. Lena's voice floated through. "We're just so grateful for everyone's support. It's been a long journey, but we finally have our forever home." Applause followed. My eyes stung, though I wasn't sure if it was from the noise or the truth of it. She had the story, and I had the silence. I walked out to the porch for air. The night was cool, heavy with the scent of cut grass and wine. I could hear muffled music through the windows, her laughter blending with it like a background track. I thought about how easily families can pretend kindness, how cruelty doesn't always scream. It often smiles. A man stepped outside to smoke, nodding politely before turning away. The ember of his cigarette glowed like a heartbeat in the dark. I sat on the porch step, tracing the rim of my empty glass. Inside, they were singing along to some old pop song. I used to love that song. Now it just sounded like something that didn't belong to me anymore. I checked my phone. No new messages. No missed calls. The quiet felt heavier than the crowd inside. I told myself I'd leave soon. I didn't owe anyone another round of smiles. But then I heard my name. Soft, muffled through the open door. I turned. Lena's fiancé was speaking to one of their friends, his voice low but clear enough to reach me. "She's just jealous," he said. For a second, everything froze. Jealous. It was such a small word, but it hit like a slap made of truth and lies all at once. I set the glass down carefully, as if any sudden move might break the last piece of composure I had left. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. The truth was sitting right there, between the laughter and the music. Family can break your heart politely. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked down the steps into the night. The sound of their voices faded behind me, until all that was left was my own breath. The first morning in my new home felt like waking up inside a secret I'd kept for too long. The light came through the windows in soft stripes, touching the floor I'd chosen myself. Oak, warm and clean. For a while, I just stood there barefoot, coffee in hand, listening to the house breathe. No voices, no judgment, no one to tell me how I should have done it differently. Just quiet. Bailey trotted across the hallway, nails clicking against the wood, tail wagging like he knew we'd finally arrived somewhere that belonged to us. I smiled and said, "What do you think, buddy? Not bad, huh?" He tilted his head, ears perked as if agreeing. Every piece in the house was a memory of work. Late nights sketching layouts, saving from every freelance job, saying no to dinners I couldn't afford. I'd built this place in my head long before I had the means. Simple, open, with light that touched every corner. It wasn't big, but it was mine. And that word, mine, felt like healing. I unpacked slowly, deliberately. Each plate on the shelf, each frame on the wall, every decision was mine to make. And that made even the smallest task sacred. I placed my grandmother's quilt on the couch, ran my hand over its soft stitches, and whispered, "We made it." There was peace in the stillness. No interruptions, no corrections, just space to exist. When I opened the windows, the wind carried the scent of pine and earth, soft and grounding. The neighborhood was quiet. A few distant birds, the faint hum of a car, Bailey barking once just to remind the world we were here. I caught my reflection in the glass, barefaced, calm, tired in the way that feels earned. For years, I'd lived in small rentals where walls held other people's stories. Now, every nail, every brushstroke on these walls was mine. I'd drawn the plan myself, a blend of modern lines and warmth, wide windows, neutral tones, and a kitchen that faced the sunrise because I wanted light to find me first thing each morning. I walked through each room, touching the edges of furniture, as if to prove to myself this wasn't temporary. The couch where I'd read on quiet evenings, the desk where I'd designed new projects, the empty corner I'd already imagined filling with a plant too tall for its pot. When I reached the kitchen, I traced my hand along the counter I'd built with reclaimed wood. It wasn't perfect. Tiny grooves marked where I'd sanded too hard, but it held honesty, and that felt better than perfection ever had. Bailey barked again, chasing a patch of sunlight across the floor. I laughed. It was the kind of sound I hadn't heard from myself in a while. Unforced, soft, real. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window. Outside, the trees swayed lazily in the wind. The world didn't seem to care whether I'd been overlooked, dismissed, or forgotten. And that was freeing. Still, a small ache lingered beneath the calm. I'd imagined this moment with family, maybe laughter echoing through the rooms, maybe Mom saying she was proud. But silence had become my inheritance, and I was learning to live with it. I whispered, "They don't get it." And for once, I didn't say it with bitterness, just truth. This house wasn't about proving anything. It was about peace, about finally creating a space where I didn't have to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. Bailey curled up beside me, his head on my foot, his eyes half closed. I reached down and scratched his ear. "You're the only one who never doubted me," I said, smiling. He sighed softly, as if answering. As the sun climbed higher, light spilled over the walls in shades of gold. I thought about how long it had taken to get here. The loans, the nights I cried into sketches, the years of quiet endurance. All of it had led me to this moment. I stood and walked to the dining area. The table was set for two, just because I liked the symmetry. I adjusted one of the chairs, straightened a fork, and stepped back. It felt too quiet again, but this time the quiet didn't sting. It healed. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. My thumb hovered above the screen. The last messages were still there. Lena's photos, everyone's hearts and congratulations. The same thread where my messages went unread. I hesitated, then set the phone down. I wasn't ready to step back into that noise. Not yet. But as the day went on, the silence started to shift. Not into loneliness, but something softer. An invitation. I began to picture them here. Mom sitting near the window, pretending not to be impressed. My brother asking about the layout. Lena smiling that curated smile of hers. A part of me wanted to show them, to make them see what I'd built on my own. Not for validation, but because I wanted this house to hold the truth of who I'd become. That night, I walked through each room one last time before bed. The air smelled faintly of paint and new beginnings. I whispered goodnight to the walls, to Bailey, to the woman I'd finally allowed myself to be. When I lay down, the quiet didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like belonging. And as I drifted towards sleep, a thought surfaced. Simple, steady, and sure. Maybe it's time to invite them. I opened my eyes again, the ceiling soft above me in the dark. "Next week," I whispered. "Just a small celebration." Bailey lifted his head, tail tapping once against the floor. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Next week they'll see. Your timing is bad." That was the first thing my mother said when I told her I was hosting a small dinner at my new place. Her voice carried that careful tone she used when pretending to be kind. "Lena's planning her engagement dinner that same weekend." I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "Oh," I said quietly. "I didn't know." "Well, she's been talking about it for weeks. You should have asked before setting a date. I looked around my kitchen, where I'd spent the morning arranging flowers and folding napkins. The vase caught the sunlight perfectly. I'd imagined her sitting right here, smiling at how I'd finally made something beautiful for myself. I can move it, I said after a pause. Maybe the next weekend? She sighed, long and heavy. Ayla, you can't expect everyone to rearrange for you. You know how busy people are. I swallowed that familiar ache, the one that had lived in me since childhood. I wasn't asking them to rearrange, Mom, just to come another day. Well, she said, her voice softening only slightly. It's just not a good time. You know how emotional these events are for Lena. It's her big moment. It always was. Her big moment, her celebration, her spotlight. I could hear the faint echo of laughter in the background. Maybe the TV, maybe her. I never knew which was worse. I forced a small smile into my tone. I understand. There was a pause. Not silence, just distance. That careful kind of pause where both people know the words they want to say won't be heard anyway. You've been quiet lately, she finally said. Everything okay? I almost laughed. Everything's fine. Just busy settling in. Well, that's good. I saw Lena's photos online. Her new place looks amazing. My throat tightened. Yeah, it does. She said they might renovate soon. You should see how she plans things. She has such vision. I closed my eyes. The word vision lingered like a bruise. I was the one who'd studied design, who'd drawn blueprints since high school, who'd built my house from sketches on napkins. But to my mother, Lena was the one with vision. I let out a quiet breath. She's always been good at getting what she wants. She works hard for it, Mom said quickly, almost defensive. You both do, in your own ways. That was her version of balance. Say something vaguely nice so I couldn't call it unfair. I walked over to the window. Outside, Bailey chased a leaf across the yard. His tail wagged, full of life and no bitterness. I envied that. Mom, I said softly, I really hoped you'd come. It's just a small dinner. I wanted you to see the house. She hesitated. I'll see it eventually, honey. Maybe after things settle down with the engagement. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Of course. There was a long silence after that. One of those hollow stretches where every unsaid thing presses against your ribs. You know, she said finally, you and Lena are so different. You've always been more independent. You don't need all this attention. I smiled faintly. Maybe I don't. But sometimes it's nice to be seen. She didn't answer that. I could hear her stirring something on the stove, metal against metal, the sound of a life I'd always been close to but never part of. After a moment, I asked quietly, do you ever stop trying to please people who never notice? The words came out before I could filter them. I hadn't planned to say them. It was just truth slipping past the guard I'd built. She exhaled sharply. Ayla, don't start this again. You're too sensitive. You always take things the wrong way. I don't think wanting to be acknowledged is the wrong way. She sighed again, longer this time. You've got to let things go. Lena's always been the social one. You're different. That's okay. Different. The word she'd used for me since I was old enough to notice tone. It was never meant as a compliment. I looked around my house, the calm colors, the warm light, the space that felt like me in every detail. For the first time, I realized I didn't want her approval anymore. I just wanted the truth to stop hurting. I'm proud of what I built, I said softly. Even if no one else is. She paused, caught off guard. Well, that's good, honey. That's really good. But her tone said otherwise. It said how nice for you, not I'm proud of you. I rubbed my temple, feeling the weight of the same conversation we'd been having for years. Always. Polite. Always unfinished. I should let you go, she said after a while. Lena's coming over soon, and I need to get ready. We're finalizing the guest list for the engagement dinner. Right, I said. Tell her congratulations from me. I will. Oh, and Ayla? Yeah. Her voice dropped just slightly. You're lucky your sister even invited you this time. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words sank in slow, like poison disguised as care. I stared out the window again, the light turning softer against the floor. Bailey barked once, breaking the silence. Yeah, I whispered. I guess I am. By noon, the house smelled like rosemary and lemon. I'd been up since 7, setting the table, ironing napkins, lighting candles that flickered softly in the afternoon light. The music was low, warm, the kind that fills silence without demanding attention. Bailey followed me from room to room, tail wagging, watching as I adjusted silverware that didn't need adjusting. They'll be here soon, I told him. Saying it out loud made it feel real. The roast sat in the oven, crisping perfectly. The wine chilled in the fridge. I checked my phone once, then again. The clock blinked 2:45. They were supposed to arrive at 2. I brushed invisible dust off my dress and took a deep breath. It was fine. My family was always late. By 3:30, the candles had started to burn unevenly. I blew one out and relit it, hoping it would straighten itself. I sent a quick text. Everything's ready whenever you are. No reply. Bailey whined near the window. I glanced outside, expecting headlights, movement, anything. But the driveway stayed empty. The quiet pressed in. At 4:10, I checked the group chat. It was full of notifications, hearts, comments, laughter. I opened it, and there they were. My family, smiling under string lights at a restaurant across town. Lena's engagement dinner. The same night, the same time. Mom was in the photos too, her hand on Lena's shoulder. My brother was holding up a glass. Even relatives who hadn't texted me in years were tagged, all of them glowing in the soft light of celebration. I stared at the screen until the laughter in those pictures began to feel loud. My house looked even quieter now, like it was listening. The roast timer beeped. I didn't move. The first tear didn't fall out of heartbreak. It came from confusion. I told them about this dinner days ago. I'd even asked Mom if the date worked. She hadn't said no, just your timing is bad. I hadn't realized she meant we won't be there. I turned off the oven. The smell of cooked food filled the air, rich and pointless. I sat at the table and looked at the 6 empty chairs I'd set. Each one had a folded napkin, a name card, a small sprig of lavender tied with string. It all looked ridiculous now, like a stage waiting for actors who'd never been cast. I poured myself a glass of wine. It tasted like nothing. They made my dream home feel like a punishment. The thought came so quietly I almost missed it. I'd built this house for peace, for pride, for connection. But in that moment, it felt like proof of everything I'd been denied. The candles kept burning. One leaned too far and dripped wax onto the tablecloth. I watched it fall, slow and steady, like time mocking me. Bailey rested his head on my knee. I stroked his fur absently, grateful at least for the one creature who never pretended affection. Guess it's just us, I whispered. My phone buzzed again. Another photo, Lena kissing her fiancé, surrounded by applause. Mom commented, "So proud of you both." I almost laughed. Not out of bitterness, just disbelief at how easily they forgot I existed. The hours passed in fragments. The food went cold. The flowers wilted slightly under the heat of the candles. I ate a small bite of roasted potatoes, not because I was hungry, but because I refused to let the night end in waste. By 9:00, I'd stopped checking my phone. I sat there in the half-dark, tracing the rim of my wine glass, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and Bailey's slow breathing. The house that had felt so alive that morning now felt hollow, like an apology waiting for someone to receive it. For a long time, I thought about all the versions of me that had tried to fit in, tried to please, tried to make it easy for them to love me. But no matter how gentle I became, they always found new ways to pretend I wasn't there. At some point, I stood and blew out each candle one by one. The smoke curled upward, twisting through the quiet. The scent lingered, bittersweet, like endings often do. When I finally went to bed, the silence was heavy but not unbearable. I stared at the ceiling and thought of the photos still circulating online. I knew tomorrow Mom would call. She'd say something like, "We thought you'd understand," or "It wasn't personal." But it was. It always was. Morning came softly, sunlight slipping through the blinds. My eyes were swollen, but my chest felt still. I brewed coffee, fed Bailey, and stepped outside to get the mail. The air was cool and clear. That's when I heard my neighbor's voice over the fence. "Hey, Ayla," he said. "Hope everything was okay last night. I saw your sister's guests leaving around 10. I froze, my hand tightening around the mail. "My sister's guests?" He nodded, frowning slightly. "Yeah, a bunch of cars were parked outside your house around 7. They were here for a bit, then drove off. Thought maybe I'd wave, but it looked tense." The coffee in my cup rippled. "Cars?" I asked quietly. "You're sure?" He nodded again. "Positive. One of them even looked like your mom's. Black SUV, right?" I stood there, trying to breathe evenly, though my heart had started to hammer. If they'd come here and then left without knocking, without calling, what exactly had they seen? The air felt colder now. Bailey barked once, sensing something shift. And in that moment, the truth began to take shape. Not as pain this time, but as clarity. She told everyone she designed it. That's what my neighbor said when I asked if he was sure it was my family he'd seen last week. His words landed harder than I expected. I stood there in my driveway, the morning air sharp against my skin, pretending I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. He shifted, looking uncomfortable. "Your sister, Lena, right? She was showing people around here a few days ago. Said she helped design your place. The whole layout, even the colors. Everyone thought it was hers." For a second, I couldn't hear anything but the wind. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, that's interesting." He gave a small sympathetic smile, the kind people use when they've seen too much. "Yeah, folks around here really liked her. Said she had great taste." "Yeah," I said, forcing a half smile. She's always been good at that. When he left, I stood on the porch with the mail still in my hand, staring at the door of my own home. The same door I'd picked out after weeks of comparing finishes and hardware. The same one I'd imagined welcoming my family through. Now it looked different, like something borrowed. I went inside. The quiet felt heavier today. My house had always been my proof of endurance, of effort, of finally being enough for myself. And now, somehow, it felt stolen. I sat at the table, the same table that had been empty last night, and thought about what it meant. They hadn't just skipped my dinner. They'd come here before it, walked through my rooms, breathed in my air, and told people it wasn't mine. Lena's voice echoed in my head, that light, confident tone she used when she wanted admiration. "I just have an eye for these things." I'd heard her say it at parties, at holidays, whenever someone complimented her. I never cared much before, but this time, she'd taken something that was mine in every sense of the word. I opened my laptop, my fingers shaking slightly, and typed her name into social media. Her page loaded instantly. Rows of perfect photos, curated captions, effortless charm. There it was, the post, a wide shot of my house, the front porch framed by the evening light, my dog sitting in the yard, my mailbox in the corner. The caption read, "Home designed by yours truly. Couldn't be prouder of this beauty." My stomach tightened. For a moment, I couldn't move. My name wasn't anywhere. Not a mention, not a hint. Just her smile, her perfection, her theft wrapped in charm. I clicked the comments. They were full of praise. "You're so talented." "This is stunning." "You should start a business," Mom had commented too. "You've always had such vision, sweetheart." I stared at her words until they blurred. Vision. That word again. The one that never belonged to me. A slow heat built in my chest. Not the kind that burns quick, but the kind that stays, steady, patient, certain. I thought of the late nights sketching layouts by lamplight, the months I spent fighting with contractors, the savings I'd scraped together from a decade of quiet work. I'd done it all alone. And somehow, Lena had managed to rewrite it into her story. I scrolled back through her posts. She'd been planting the lie for weeks. A photo of paint samples. Another of a light fixture she captioned, "Choosing details is my favorite part." Then one from my front porch steps. Her hand holding a coffee cup, the caption reading, "My happy place." My hands trembled as I closed the screen. The betrayal was layered. It wasn't about attention anymore. It was about erasure. About her needing to take what I'd built so no one would ever see me for what I really was. Capable. I stood and walked through the house, seeing it now the way she must have described it to others. Minimalist, modern, light-filled, she probably said. Designed for calm and balance. Words I'd used myself. Years of planning distilled into a lie that fit her better. I ran my hand along the wall. Smooth, cool, mine. I'd made this. No amount of performance could change that. Still, it hurt in a way I couldn't put into words. The silence I'd learned to live with had been replaced by something worse. The sound of being rewritten. Bailey followed me, his tail brushing my leg. I knelt to pet him, whispering, "She didn't build this. I did." Saying it aloud helped, even if no one else would hear it. My phone buzzed on the counter. Another notification. Lena's post again, now with over 200 likes. Her fiancé had commented, "Couldn't have done it without you." I almost laughed. Not from humor, but from the absurdity of it. How easily people believe the prettier story. How quickly truth becomes optional when confidence tells the tale. I sat down again, staring out the window as light shifted across the floor. I thought about every time I'd stayed quiet to keep peace. Every apology I'd offered when I hadn't done anything wrong. Every moment I'd handed them grace, thinking they'd see me eventually. They didn't. They just learned I wouldn't fight back. That realization sat heavy, but underneath it was something else. Resolve. The kind that doesn't need permission. The house was still mine, whether anyone knew it or not. But the story? That was about to change. I looked back at the screen one more time, at the lie dressed as pride, and whispered to myself, "You wanted a stage, Lena. You just forgot who built it. She's just more likable. That's all." That's what my teacher said in 4th grade when I told her Lena had turned in my project as hers. I can still see the way she smiled. That tired, patronizing look adults get when they've already chosen who the good kid is. "Next time, work together," she added. Lena stood beside me, hands clasped behind her back, pretending to look sorry. That was the first time I learned that charm beats truth. Lena was the kind of child who knew how to make people fall for her. She'd tilt her head, say something sweet, and suddenly every wrong thing she did disappeared under that smile. I was quieter, slower to defend myself. Our parents used to say we balanced each other out. What they really meant was I made her look better by staying quiet. By middle school, she was already rewriting our life story. She'd tell people she helped me with my science project when she'd only shown up to paint one corner of the display board. When I won the local art fair, she told everyone she'd taught me to draw. She never stole my work outright again. She didn't need to. She just placed herself close enough to it that no one could tell the difference. Even with boys, it was the same pattern. I'd talk to someone for weeks, and suddenly Lena would appear, laughing a little too loudly, touching a little too casually. "I'm just being friendly," she'd say when I confronted her. And somehow, I'd end up being the jealous one. Once in high school, I overheard her telling her friends, "Ayla's sweet, just plain. She's not made for attention." I remember standing in the hallway, gripping my books so tightly they creased. She saw me, froze for a second, and then smiled. "You know I didn't mean it like that," she said. "You're just different." That word again, different. It followed me like a label I never asked for. I carried that silence for years. It was easier to let her have the spotlight. It kept the peace. Our parents adored the peace, Dad especially. He'd beam at Lena's report cards, her dance recitals, her dates with promising boys. When I got into architecture school, he said, "That's nice, honey," and went back to watching TV. Lena had a way of standing in the doorway of my accomplishments and making them hers by proximity. She never built anything on her own. She just knew where to stand when the cameras flashed. Now, seeing her post about my house, pretending she designed it, I realized nothing had changed. It wasn't new, it was just louder. The world had become her audience, and she knew exactly how to play them. I scrolled through the comments again, and one from an old classmate caught my eye. "You've always been the creative one," it read. I almost laughed. The sentence felt like a ghost from our childhood. I remembered a night in college when I'd come home for the holidays. Mom had set the table beautifully, and Lena was telling a story about her job offer in marketing. Dad raised his glass and said, "You've got your mother's gift, Lena. People just love you." Then he looked at me and added, "And Ayla's the steady one. Every family needs one." Steady. Another word that meant invisible. I'd smiled, pretending it didn't sting. I always did. But tonight, sitting in my own living room surrounded by her lies, I felt the weight of every small moment that had built this silence. I opened the box on my coffee table, the one with old photographs Mom had given me. Most of them were of birthdays and family trips. In almost every picture, Lena was at the center, eyes bright, arm around someone. I was always off to the side, smiling but out of focus. I traced the edge of one photo, the two of us standing by a sandcastle at the beach. I remembered that day. I'd built the whole thing, spent hours carving details into the towers. When the photographer walked by, Lena stepped in front of me, put her hand on the tallest tower, and said, "We made this." I didn't correct her then. I never did. I guess part of me hoped that if I kept giving, she'd eventually stop taking. The sound of my phone buzzing pulled me out of the memory. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another notification from her post. But the screen said unknown number. Something about it made me answer. "Hello?" A man's voice came through, calm and professional. "Is this Ayla Brooks?" "Yes." "This is Daniel Morris. I'm calling on behalf of your father's estate attorney. He asked that I reach out about an urgent property matter. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I straightened in my chair. "My father's estate? Why, what happened?" "It's nothing to worry about," he said. "But we'll need to discuss it in person. Are you available tomorrow morning?" My chest tightened. I hadn't spoken to Dad in months. "Yes, I can be there." "Good," he said. "I'll send the address shortly." When the call ended, I sat in silence, the phone still warm in my hand. My reflection stared back at me from the black screen. An urgent property matter. Something in his tone had sounded deliberate, almost cautious. I looked around my house again, the house she claimed as hers, and felt a strange shift inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't just hurt. I was alert. Whatever this was, it felt like the beginning of something I wasn't meant to miss. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" The lawyer's words hung in the air, polite but final. He looked up from the papers, hands folded, voice measured. "The lake cabin was transferred to your sister's name 3 months before your father passed." For a second, I didn't understand him. I thought maybe he meant something else, a maintenance transfer, a temporary arrangement. But then he slid the folder toward me. I saw the signatures. My father's, my mother's, and Lena's, neatly written in blue ink where mine should have been. The cabin, the only place I ever loved without question. I stared at the paper, my hand tightening around the edge of the desk. "He promised it was mine," I said quietly. Mr. Morris nodded slowly, eyes soft but detached, like someone used to these kinds of heartbreaks. "He mentioned that, yes, but the deed shows your mother's co-signature. It was a joint decision." Joint decision. The words made my stomach turn. I could almost hear my mother's voice, calm and practiced. "It just made sense, Ayla. You don't even go there anymore." I looked at the date again. 3 months before he died. That was when he was already sick. He hadn't even told me he was making changes. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe someone else spoke for him. I tried to steady my breathing. Was there a letter? Anything from him? The lawyer paused, hesitated for a beat too long, then opened another file. There was a note, short. He slid a folded piece of paper across the desk. "It's addressed to you." My heart thudded once, heavy and slow. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, the way it had been near the end. Ayla, I hope you understand. Lena will take care of things now. She has help. You don't need to worry about the cabin anymore. That was all. No warmth, no memory. Just another quiet erasure, this time signed in ink. I folded the letter back with steady hands. She has help, I repeated softly. And I guess I don't. The lawyer cleared his throat. There is one more matter, he said. A separate file regarding your own property acquisition. I believe you requested an updated title certification. I nodded automatically. Yes, for my home. He smiled faintly, grateful for something procedural to return to. It's finalized. All under your name now. No shared rights, no liens, you're the sole owner. The contrast was almost poetic. They'd stolen the one place that held my childhood, but they couldn't touch the one I'd built with my own hands. I stared at my father's note again, at the finality of it. The ink had faded slightly, like even the paper knew how easily things could disappear. For years, I'd blamed myself for not being easy enough, bright enough, loud enough to stay in their orbit. But sitting there, I realized it wasn't about me at all. It never had been. They needed me small so they could feel whole. I folded the papers neatly, slid them back across the desk. What do you need me to sign? He pointed to the final line on a new document. This one confirms receipt of your property certificate. I picked up the pen. My reflection in the polished wood looked calm, unreadable. Inside, there was no anger left, just a strange kind of stillness. For a long moment, I didn't move. My father's voice echoed faintly in my memory, the way it used to sound when he'd call me his little architect. I used to believe that meant something, that he saw me. Now, I knew he'd just been admiring what I built, not who I was. I signed my name slowly, every stroke deliberate. Mr. Morris nodded. That's all, Ms. Brooks. We'll send you digital copies for your records. Thank you, I said, rising to leave. He stood too. For what it's worth, he added gently, families often make complicated choices. I smiled politely. No, Mr. Morris, they make convenient ones. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. The sky stretched wide over the city, pale and endless. I walked to my car without rushing, letting the rhythm of my steps calm me. Each one felt more certain than the last. I thought of the cabin by the lake, the peeling white shutters, the smell of pine, the dock where I used to sit with my sketchbook while Dad fished in silence. I'd loved that place because it was the only one that didn't require performance. No talking, no pretending, just stillness and sky. Maybe that's why it had to go. There was too much of me in it. I started the car and sat for a minute, watching the office building in the rearview mirror. For once, I didn't cry. There was no grief left to give. Have you ever discovered the truth so late it didn't even hurt? Just confirmed what you already knew? That's what this felt like. Not a wound reopening, but a mirror clearing. The truth had been there all along. I'd just been too loyal to see it. I reached into my bag, found my copy of the property deed Mr. Morris had handed me. My name sat alone at the top, clean and unshared. I traced it with my thumb, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. They could have the lake, the cabin, the memories. I had something they'd never understand, ownership of myself. When I stepped out of the car and back into the sunlight, I felt taller somehow, lighter. By the time I reached the courthouse steps to file one last set of papers, something small, something entirely mine, the calm had settled into something solid. And when I signed my name again, my hand didn't shake. I just wanted to clear the air, Lena said, her voice smooth as the wine she was swirling in her glass. The restaurant was dim, soft jazz playing somewhere above us, candles flickering between polished silverware. She smiled across the table like she was doing me a favor. We've both had a lot going on. It's silly to hold grudges, right? I nodded slowly, resting my hands on the table. Right. She leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. Good. Because honestly, Ayla, I've been meaning to tell you how proud I am. The house really came together beautifully. I can see why you were so attached to it. I looked at her, my expression calm. It still means a lot to me. I bet, she said, smiling just enough to sting. Of course, you know how people talk. Once that post went viral, everyone assumed I'd helped. I didn't correct them. You know how the internet gets. But it's nice, isn't it? All that attention on something we both care about. We. She used that word so easily, as if she hadn't erased my name weeks ago. I didn't respond. She thrived on attention. Silence made her uneasy. She filled it with more words. Anyway, I wanted tonight to feel special. A new start. I mean, Dad's estate is settled now, the cabin's officially mine, and I've got my engagement party coming up. It feels like everything's falling into place. Congratulations, I said quietly. Her smile widened. Thanks, it's been a whirlwind. Planning the wedding's been a lot, but it helps having Mom's input. She's just so excited for me. I took a sip of water, letting her talk. Every word she spoke was a performance, but she didn't even realize she had an audience that wasn't clapping anymore. She kept going, as if rehearsing her lines. You should see the venue, Ayla. It's overlooking the lake, the same one where we used to go as kids. I thought it'd be poetic. The cabin lake, I said softly. She blinked. Oh, yeah, I forgot you used to love that place. Well, you'll see it again soon. Maybe it'll bring back good memories. Good memories. I remembered sitting on that dock with Dad while Lena stayed inside to take pictures of herself in the mirror. I remembered when he told me I had his hands, the ones that could build things. I wondered what he'd think now, watching her auction off sentiment as decor. Mom said you've been busy with your house lately, she added, sipping her wine. You always liked doing things alone. Must be nice having so much independence? There it was again, the backhand disguised as praise. It is, I said. Her brows lifted. Well, I guess we just live differently. I've always been the family one. You know, surrounded by people, making things happen. You've always been steady. I smiled faintly. That's what Dad used to say. She leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper like we were sharing a secret. Between us, Mom and I did talk about your future a little. You should think long-term, Ayla. I mean, now that the estate's done, there's not much left for anyone to manage. It's just me and Mom handling what's left. Maybe you could help with small things later if you're not too busy with your projects. My fork stilled against the plate. You mean the projects that built my home? She blinked, caught off guard for half a breath, then smiled again. Exactly. You've always had a talent for that sort of thing. Sometimes silence is not weakness. It's study. I studied every move she made, the tilt of her chin, the way her laughter always followed her own name. I realized then she wasn't cruel by accident. She'd spent her whole life learning how to win sympathy before anyone else could speak. She signaled for the check before I could. My treat, she said warmly. Consider it a peace offering. Peace, I repeated. That's generous. She laughed, not noticing the edge beneath my tone. I'm just trying to keep family together. You know how easily people drift. I met her gaze, calm and steady. I do. For the first time all evening, she hesitated. The silence between us turned solid, like glass about to crack. When the waiter set the receipt down, she reached for it quickly. You really don't have to say anything. I know this has been complicated for you. I tilted my head slightly. You think? Her eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. I smiled gently. When the plates were cleared, I stood, reaching for my coat. Thank you for dinner, Lena. Of course, she said. I'm glad we could talk. I slipped one arm into my sleeve and looked at her one last time. So am I. She grinned, relieved, thinking she'd won again. Good. I told Mom you just needed time. I nodded slowly, letting my words settle between us. You're right. I did need time, and tonight helped. Her expression softened. I'm glad to hear that. I picked up my purse, leaning just close enough for her to hear me clearly. I learned a lot from you. The way her smile faltered, just slightly, was worth the wait. I just had one more question, I told Mr. Morris over the phone. My voice was steady, lighter than before. He probably thought I was just wrapping up loose ends. He didn't realize this was the beginning. Of course, he said. What can I help you with, Ms. Brooks? I looked out my living room window, the sunlight cutting through the blinds in thin, clean lines. I was reviewing the trust documents again. There's a clause I didn't understand fully. It mentioned something about ownership being voided if there's misrepresentation or fraudulent claim of contribution. Is that still in effect? He hesitated. Yes, it's an older clause, but it's still valid. It was meant to prevent disputes between beneficiaries. Why do you ask? Just curiosity, I said. I've been thinking about how my sister presented the lake cabin as her project. You know, the one transferred to her. There was a pause long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Go on. I took a breath. If someone were to claim design credit or professional involvement falsely, would that qualify as misrepresentation under that clause? He cleared his throat, choosing his words carefully. Technically, yes, especially if the claim affected perceived value or legal ownership. But these situations can be complex. Complex, I repeated quietly. Right. I walked over to my desk and set the phone on speaker. My laptop was open to Lena's social media. Her posts glowed across the screen, smiling photos, hashtags like had my design journey and hatch family legacy. The same house I built staring back at me from every angle. Would public claims count as evidence? I asked. They could, he said slowly. If verified, I smiled to myself. Good to know. We talked for a few more minutes, just enough to keep it casual. When I hung up, I sat in silence, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not the loud kind that demands to be seen, but the quiet kind that builds power, one fact at a time. I opened a new folder on my computer and titled it Documentation. Inside, I created subfolders, blueprints, contracts, emails, permits, licenses. Every piece of paper I'd ever kept suddenly had purpose. I'd saved them out of habit, maybe pride. Now they were proof. As I uploaded the architectural drawings I designed years ago, I noticed the signatures again. My name, Ayla Brooks, licensed architect, AR11278. Verified, dated, certified. No one could rewrite that. I scrolled back to Lena's post, the one that said home design by yours truly. I took a screenshot, then another. Every caption, every comment. People praising her work, the article a lifestyle blogger wrote about the creative sister. Every lie recorded in pixels. It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was precision. I opened an old folder from my licensing board, the one that required professional ethics verification. It stated clearly that misrepresentation of another professional's work could result in legal consequences. That was the part that made me pause. I'd spent so long avoiding conflict that I'd forgotten something essential. Silence protects the wrong people. I leaned back in my chair, letting the thought settle. The house was quiet except for Bailey's soft breathing on the rug. Outside, the trees moved gently. The kind of day that used to make me feel small. Not anymore. I picked up the phone again, scrolling to Mr. Morris's contact. Before I could call back, another thought came. Proof was one thing, timing was another. Lena's engagement was in 3 weeks. The lake cabin would be her backdrop, her perfect story tied with a bow. If there was ever a stage for truth, it would be that day. I smiled faintly. You wanted to be seen, Lena, I whispered. Let's make sure you are. I began organizing the evidence carefully. Each file labeled, each document verified. I even included the invoices from my contractors, the same ones who could confirm every design decision came from me, not her. For every lie she told, I found a line of truth waiting. The more I worked, the calmer I became. The noise in my mind, the years of trying to be seen, understood, chosen, quieted until all that was left was focus. Every betrayal had taught me something, but this one had given me direction. When I finished, I printed everything and placed it into a clean white envelope. No anger, no scribbled notes, just evidence, simple and irrefutable. I sealed it, running my finger along the flap, and wrote one word on the front: Brooks Estate. I looked at the name for a long time. For once, it didn't sting. It felt earned. Before I turned off the lamp, I whispered to the empty room, "You thought I'd break, but I was taking notes." I slipped the envelope into my drawer, right beside my property deed. The two pieces of paper sat side by side, what they took and what I built. Then I closed it slowly, knowing when it opened again, it wouldn't be in silence. When I listed my house, everyone thought I was leaving. "Finally moving on?" my neighbor asked as she waved from across the street. I smiled and said, "Something like that." What I didn't explain was that I wasn't leaving at all. I was expanding. The listing wasn't for sale, it was for transformation. I was converting the home I'd built, the one they dismissed as my little project, into a private event space for design clients and investors. It started small, just a few appointments a week. Then it grew. People wanted to see where the story began, the space that had inspired the woman they'd read about online. Articles started appearing, quietly at first. Local architect turns family home into creative studio. Then another, the woman redefining heritage design. I didn't pitch them. I didn't even know the journalists. They found me. And when they did, they found my name. Spelled correctly, credited correctly, attached to every blueprint and license. It felt strange at first, seeing my face beside the house that used to feel like a secret. For years, I'd kept it private, too afraid someone would take it away. Now it was public, thriving, untouchable. Lena didn't call, but I knew she'd seen it. I could tell by the way Mom's messages started sounding uneasy. "Your sister feels left out," she said once. "You should include her somehow. She's been emotional lately." I typed and deleted my reply 3 times before sending, "She's included in enough, Mom." The first event I hosted was for a magazine's architecture feature. They wanted a live walkthrough, a behind-the-scenes look at how modern design could honor legacy. I stood by the glass railing, explaining how light shifted through the rooms, how every space had purpose. They listened closely, recording, nodding, asking questions. When the piece came out, the photos were stunning. The headline was simple: Brooks designs what others only inherit. I stared at it for a long time. No anger, no triumph, just a deep, quiet acknowledgement of balance finally restored. 2 weeks later, Lena's voice broke the silence. "You're everywhere," she said over the phone, pretending to laugh. "People keep sending me links. Even Mom saw that article about your studio. Guess I underestimated you." Her tone was sugar-dipped in envy. "I guess you did," I said. She hesitated. "You know, Dad would be proud you're keeping the family name visible." "Maybe," I said softly. "Or maybe he'd finally see who carried it." She went quiet after that. I could almost hear her smile flatten. I wasn't trying to compete. I was just done shrinking. Every piece of me they'd dismissed, every plan, every sketch, every quiet moment spent rebuilding, was now standing tall, framed in glass and light. The kind of truth that didn't need to shout to be seen. I started receiving more inquiries. Investors, design schools, private clients wanting workshops. Each time someone walked through the door, they saw proof that legacy wasn't what you inherited. It was what you built despite them. Then the real shift began. My company's site went live, and within a week, the magazine features linked directly to it. The analytics surged. I didn't chase visibility. It came to me. And with it came something else. Recognition that couldn't be stolen. Mom called again, sounding uneasy. "Lena's been a little upset. Says people keep asking about your house, thinking it was hers. She feels embarrassed." I said nothing for a few seconds. "That must be hard for her." "You didn't have to make it public," Mom sighed. "It was never private," I said. "It was just ignored." The words surprised even me. Calm, clear, final. After that call, I opened my email to find a new message sitting at the top. The subject line read, Brooks Family Trust, urgent review. 2 recipients, my name and hers. The moment I saw it, a slow calm settled in. Not fear, just understanding. Every lie eventually writes its own correction. This meeting shouldn't take long, Mr. Morris said as he adjusted his glasses. The conference room was smaller than I expected, quiet enough to hear the faint hum of the ceiling vent. Mom sat across from me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Lena was beside her, phone face down, pretending she wasn't nervous. Mr. Morris opened the folder in front of him. I've reviewed the trust documents again, as requested. There's been an update based on new information provided. Lena gave a small laugh. Update? On what? Everything's been finalized. He glanced at her, then at me. Normally, yes, but in this case, we found evidence of misrepresentation related to the lake property transfer. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Mom's head turned sharply toward him. What kind of misrepresentation? Mr. Morris pulled out a stack of papers and slid them across the table. Ms. Brooks, Ayla, submitted her original architectural records, permits, and dated professional licenses proving design authorship. Additionally, multiple public statements were made crediting another individual with that work. According to the clause in the trust, any property obtained through false claim is void. Lena's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. I didn't falsely claim anything. Everyone knew I was involved. Mr. Morris looked calm. The documentation says otherwise. The ownership transfer of the lake cabin is now considered invalid. Legally, the property reverts to the estate until reassigned. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air itself refused to move. Mom stared down at the table, avoiding my eyes. Lena's nails tapped once, then stopped. Mr. Morris continued, his tone gentle but firm. The matter will be formalized in writing. There's nothing further to discuss. I looked at the papers lying between us. My father's signature was still visible at the bottom of the trust clause, his old looping handwriting steady and sure. I finally spoke. Dad believed truth always builds stronger foundations. My voice was quiet, but it cut through everything else. Mom shifted slightly, her gaze fixed on the edge of the table. She didn't look up. Lena's face turned red. You always ruin everything? She said, her voice trembling with something between anger and disbelief. I didn't respond. I just sat back, calm, steady, the way my father had taught me. The truth didn't need to be loud, it just needed to stand. When they walked in, they didn't recognize it at first. The chandeliers, the music, the quiet laughter. It all looked too polished, too far from what they remembered of me. But then they saw the framed plaques on the wall, the logo embossed across every display board. Brooks Design Studio. My name, my work, my home. Mom froze near the entrance. Lena stood beside her, jaw tight, her clutch pressed so hard against her palm it might have left a mark. I caught her eyes for only a second before turning to the guest greeting me. Your house is breathtaking, a woman said, shaking my hand. And the story behind it, it's just so inspiring. You really turned everything around. I smiled, calm and steady. It took time, but some foundations are stronger than they look. The woman laughed softly. That's a wonderful way to put it. Across the room, I watched Mom glance around at the photos mounted on the walls. Progress shots of the renovation, press clippings, interviews. My team had done a beautiful job. Every frame told the same story: design, endurance, truth. A reporter approached me with a glass of champagne. Congratulations again on the award. This project really put your firm on the map. How does it feel seeing your work celebrated in this space? It feels right, I said quietly. This house has seen every version of me. I'm just glad the final one finally fits. When I looked back, Lena was pretending to admire a floral installation. Her reflection in the glass gave her away. Restless, uncomfortable, shrinking. Mom came over, her voice low. You did well, Ayla. Really. Thank you, I said. I appreciate that. She nodded and turned away, leaving the words hanging between us. Later, as guests began to leave, Lena passed by me near the doorway. Her perfume lingered, familiar and faintly sharp. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The silence said enough. I waited until she reached the steps outside before I said, softly but clear, "Thanks for coming this time." She didn't look back. She didn't have to. I never raised my voice. I only raised my worth. That was the quiet truth of it all, the kind of revenge no one could post about or undo. For so long, I thought justice had to look loud, dramatic, final. But standing here now, barefoot in my garden with soil under my nails and the smell of rain in the air, I realize peace isn't silence, it's freedom. The roses are blooming again, stronger than last spring. I planted them after everything ended, a reminder that beauty doesn't ask for permission to grow back. Sometimes I still hear echoes of their words, the dismissive tones, the laughter that made me feel small. But the sound fades before it reaches me now. I think that's what healing actually is, the distance between who you were and who you decided to become. I spend my mornings here, watering the beds, pruning the branches. There's something sacred about routine. It steadies you. It reminds you that life doesn't stop for cruelty. It continues, stubbornly, beautifully. Every now and then, someone from the old world reaches out. A message, a question, a thin attempt to rewrite what happened. I respond with kindness, not because they deserve it, but because I finally do. I used to think forgiveness meant letting them off the hook. Now I understand it means unhooking yourself. I never needed to ruin them. I just needed to stop needing their approval. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after being unseen, I hope my story reminds you that peace is the loudest revenge. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to stay for the next story. They're all true in their own way. I look at my house from across the yard, the evening light spilling through its windows. For years, I waited for footsteps that never came. But now, I don't listen for doors or voices. I listen to the quiet hum of a life that's finally mine. This house finally feels like home, because I no longer wait for them to walk through the door.